The dust-stained woman collapsed at the threshold of the Nightingale Ranch, her trembling fingers clutching the weathered wooden post as if it were the last anchor in a raging storm. Flora Kingsley hadn't eaten in 3 days, and the merciless Wyoming Territory sun of 1876 had sapped what little strength remained in her once sturdy frame. As consciousness threatened to abandon her, she caught sight of a tall figure emerging from the stables, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. Brock Nightingale wiped his calloused hands on a rag as he approached the unexpected visitor. At 32, he'd seen his share of hardship on the frontier, but something about the determination in the woman's eyes as she fought to stay upright stirred something within him. "Madam? You all right there?" His voice carried across the yard, deep and steady like the rolling thunder that preceded summer storms. Flora's parched lips parted, her voice barely audible. "Work. I can work. Your stables need washing. I saw them. Food is all I ask." Her knees buckled, and she would have hit the hard-packed earth if Brock hadn't crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. Strong arms caught her, and Flora was vaguely aware of being lifted as easily as a child before darkness claimed her. When she awoke, Flora found herself on a soft bed in a sparsely furnished but clean room. A candle flickered on the bedside table, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. She tried to sit up but fell back against the pillow, her head spinning. "Easy now," came a woman's voice, and Flora turned to see a plump, gray-haired lady approaching with a steaming bowl. "You've been out since Mr. Nightingale brought you in yesterday evening." "Yesterday?" Flora croaked, accepting the bowl of fragrant stew with shaking hands. "Yes, dear. I'm Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. You just eat up now. Mr. Nightingale said you're to rest and recover your strength." Flora took a careful spoonful, nearly moaning at the rich taste of beef and vegetables. "I came to work. I don't take charity." Mrs. Winters smiled kindly. "No one said anything about charity. The ranch always needs good hands. But you can't work if you're half dead from hunger, can you?" For 3 days, Flora remained in that room, regaining her strength with regular meals and rest. On the morning of the 4th day, she dressed in her worn but now clean clothes that Mrs. Winters had laundered and made her way downstairs, determined to earn her keep. She found Brock at the breakfast table, his dark hair still damp from washing, studying ledgers with intense concentration. He looked up as she entered, his blue eyes assessing her improved condition. "Miss Kingsley," he acknowledged, setting aside his papers. "Glad to see you on your feet." "Mr. Nightingale," Flora replied formally, her chin lifted with pride despite her circumstances. "I appreciate your hospitality, but I came here to work. I'll start with your stables as offered." A hint of amusement touched his eyes. "The stables were cleaned yesterday. But if you're set on working, Mrs. Winters could use help with the garden and kitchen. Once you've built up your strength, we can discuss more permanent arrangements." Flora wanted to protest, to insist on the harder labor she'd originally proposed, but practicality won out. "That's fair. Thank you." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Miss Kingsley? If you don't mind my asking, what brought you to my doorstep in such a state?" Flora hesitated, the memories still raw. The usual story, Mr. Nightingale. Dreams that didn't pan out, promises that weren't kept, and a cruel reminder that a woman alone has few friends in this territory. Brock nodded, not pressing for details. "Well, you've found one friend here, at least. Maybe more, given time." Over the next weeks, Flora proved herself invaluable. Her hands might have been soft at first, but they grew calloused and capable. She rose before dawn to help Mrs. Winters prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, tended the vegetable garden with unexpected skill, and by the end of the first month, had reorganized the household storage rooms so efficiently that even Brock commented on the improvement. What surprised her most was how Brock treated her not as a charity case or a servant, but with a respect she hadn't encountered since her father died 3 years prior. He sought her opinion on household matters, listened when she spoke, and never failed to thank her for her contributions, no matter how small. One evening in late June, Flora was hanging laundry when she noticed Brock returning from town, riding hard. His expression was thunderous as he dismounted, tossing the reins to a stable hand. "Everything all right, Mr. Nightingale?" she called, concern overriding propriety. He strode toward her, jaw clenched. "Banks calling in loans early. Droughts hit everyone hard, and they're panicking." He ran a hand through his hair. "I need to check the ledgers, see what we can sell without crippling the ranch." Without thinking, Flora set down her basket. "I can help. I kept my father's books for years." Brock looked skeptical, but desperation won out. "All right, Miss Kingsley. Let's see what you can do." By lamplight, they pored over the accounts together. Flora's quick mind caught discrepancies Brock had missed and identified places where costs could be cut without sacrificing productivity. As the night deepened, their shoulders occasionally brushed, and Flora became increasingly aware of the man beside her not just as her employer, but as someone whose determination and integrity she'd come to admire. Near midnight they had a plan. Brock leaned back in his chair, regarding her with new appreciation. "You're full of surprises, Miss Kingsley. Where did you learn bookkeeping?" "My father was a teacher before we came west," she explained, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "He believed women should have practical knowledge, not just ornamental skills." "A wise man," Brock said softly. "He'd be proud of you." The quiet compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you. I should retire now. Good night, Mr. Nightingale." As summer progressed into fall, Flora's position at the ranch evolved. No longer just a helper to Mrs. Winters, she became Brock's unofficial business partner, helping manage accounts and even suggesting innovations that improved the ranch's operations. The other ranch hands, initially skeptical of the city woman, came to respect her practical intelligence and unfailing work ethic. Only Lucas Harding, Brock's foreman, remained coldly dismissive. "Don't see why we need a woman interfering in ranch business," he muttered one day within Flora's hearing. "Pretty face turns the boss soft in the head." Flora pretended not to hear, but the words stung. She'd worked hard to earn her place and didn't want anyone thinking she'd used feminine wiles to advance her position. That evening, she approached Brock as he sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "Mr. Nightingale, I think it's time I moved on," she stated, her voice carefully controlled. "I've imposed on your generosity long enough." Brock turned, genuine surprise on his face. "Imposed? Flora, you've earned your keep 10 times over." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it made her heart skip traitorously. "Nevertheless, there's talk." "I don't want to damage your reputation or authority with your men." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Harding," he said flatly. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing that matters," she replied quickly. "But he's not entirely wrong. My presence here is unconventional." Brock stood, closing the distance between them. "Do you want to leave?" The simple question caught her off guard. "I know. But what I want isn't the only consideration. It is to me." His gaze held hers, steady and sincere. "This ranch runs better with you here." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've come to value your presence, not just your skills." The admission hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Flora's carefully maintained composure wavered. "Thank you, but—" A shout from the bunkhouse interrupted them. One of the hands came running, his face urgent. "Boss! Riders coming fast from the north. Looks like trouble." The moment shattered. Brock was instantly alert, reaching for the rifle kept by the door. "Get inside, Flora. Lock the doors." She obeyed without question, watching from the window as Brock and several hands formed a defensive line. Through the gathering dusk, she could make out 5 riders approaching at speed, dust billowing behind them. To her relief, Brock lowered his rifle as the group drew closer. They weren't raiders but neighboring ranchers, led by Eli Morgan, whose property bordered Nightingale land to the north. "Nightingale!" Morgan called as he dismounted. "3 of my men shot dead, barn burned to the ground. Carson's place hit yesterday. Whoever's doing it is headed your way next." The news sent a chill through Flora. The frontier's lawlessness had been escalating in recent months, with desperate men turning to violence as times grew harder. Brock's response was immediate and decisive. He dispatched riders to alert the marshal in the nearest town, set up watches, and moved the women Flora, Mrs. Winters, and the cook's wife to the most defensible part of the main house. That night, as Flora tried to sleep in the small storage room converted to temporary quarters, she heard Brock's voice outside her door, speaking quietly with his foreman. "We should send the women to town," Harding was saying. "They'll just be in the way if there's fighting." "And make them easy targets on the road?" Brock countered. "No. They stay where I can protect them." "That Kingsley woman's got you thinking with something other than your head," Harding muttered. "She's nothing but trouble." There was a dangerous pause before Brock spoke again, his voice low and hard. "That's enough, Lucas. Miss Kingsley has earned her place here. Question her again, and you can find work elsewhere." Footsteps retreated, and Flora let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The fierce protectiveness in Brock's voice had stirred something deep within her, something she'd been trying to deny for weeks. Dawn came without incident, but the tension remained. Brock assigned Flora to inventory and prepare medical supplies, a task that kept her usefully occupied while acknowledging her practical nature. As she sorted bandages and medicines, she found herself working alongside him, preparing ammunition. "I'm sorry about all this," he said quietly. "You came here looking for safety." Flora shook her head. "I came looking for food and work. You gave me much more." She met his eyes. "I don't regret staying, Brock." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the effect was immediate. Something in his expression softened, and he reached across the table to cover her hand with his own. "When this is over..." Gunshots outside cut him off. Brock was on his feet instantly, grabbing his rifle. "Stay here," he ordered, but Flora was already moving, gathering the medical supplies. "I'll be ready for any injured," she stated firmly. The attack was swift and brutal. 8 riders hit the ranch from multiple directions, firing indiscriminately. From her position inside, Flora heard the chaos of shouting men and frightened animals. She prepared bandages with steady hands, refusing to give in to fear. The door burst open, and 2 ranch hands half carried a third between them, blood soaking his shirt. Flora directed them to lay him on the table and went to work without hesitation, cutting away fabric to reveal a bullet wound in his shoulder. "It went clean through," she told the injured man, a young cowboy named Charlie. "You're lucky." Outside, the gunfire was intensifying. Flora worked methodically, stemming the bleeding and bandaging the wound as she'd seen her father do during the war. She'd just finished when Lucas Harding staggered in, clutching his side. Despite his previous antagonism, Flora helped him to a chair and examined his injury, a deep graze that looked worse than it was. As she cleaned and bandaged it, Harding watched her with a mixture of pain and grudging respect. "Why are you helping me?" he asked gruffly. "You know what I think of you." Flora didn't look up from her work. "Because you're bleeding, Mr. Harding? That's reason enough." A crash from outside was followed by shouting. Harding tensed, trying to rise. "They're in the yard. Nightingale. We'll handle it," Flora finished firmly, pushing him back down. "You'll only get yourself killed." Harding studied her for a long moment. "You care for him?" It wasn't a question, and Flora didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "More than I should. He could do worse," Harding said unexpectedly. "Reckon I was wrong about you, Miss Kingsley." Before Flora could respond, the door flew open again. This time it was Brock, blood streaming from a cut above his eye but otherwise unharmed. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him. "They're retreating," he reported. "Marshal and his deputies showed up just in time." His eyes locked on Flora, taking in the blood-stained apron and her composed efficiency. "Anyone badly hurt?" Charlie took a bullet to the shoulder, but it's clean. Mr. Harding has a graze. Others are minor cuts and bruises, she replied, already moving to clean the blood from Brock's face. He caught her wrist gently. You're something else, Flora Kingsley, he said softly, so only she could hear. When I saw you at my doorstep half dead from hunger, I never imagined you'd end up saving my ranch and my men. The aftermath of the attack brought changes to Nightingale Ranch. 2 of the raiders had been captured and identified as hired guns working for a cattle baron trying to drive smaller ranchers out of business. With that threat neutralized, life slowly returned to normal, or a new normal, as Flora found her position increasingly formalized. Brock officially hired her as the ranch's bookkeeper and household manager, providing her with a small salary and permanent quarters in the main house. The arrangement raised eyebrows in town, but Flora's dignified bearing and undeniable contributions to the ranch's success gradually silenced most critics. What couldn't be silenced were her own growing feelings for Brock. Each day brought new moments of connection, his hand lingering on hers as he passed ledgers, conversations that stretched late into the evening, the way his eyes sought her first when he returned from town or the range. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in gold and crimson, Brock announced plans for a journey to Cheyenne on business. I'll be gone a week, maybe 2, he told Flora as they reviewed accounts one evening. I'd like you to manage things here. Flora looked up in surprise. Are you certain? Mr. Harding is an excellent foreman but knows nothing about business, Brock finished. The men respect you now, Flora. Even Lucas. You're more than capable. The confidence in his voice warmed her. Thank you. I won't let you down. He smiled, that rare full smile that transformed his serious face. You never have. He hesitated, then added, There's something else I'd like to discuss when I return. Something important. Flora's heart quickened, but she kept her voice steady. I look forward to it. The 2 weeks of Brock's absence were the longest of Flora's life. She threw herself into ranch operations, proving his faith in her well-founded. When a dispute arose between 2 hands, she mediated with firm fairness. When unexpected rains threatened the winter feed storage, she organized a team to move it to higher ground. Even Harding began to defer to her judgment on matters beyond the immediate handling of cattle. But each night, alone in her room, she allowed herself to wonder about Brock's parting words. She dared not hope too much, yet could not help remembering the look in his eyes as he'd spoken of something important. 16 days after his departure, Flora was in the garden harvesting the last of the season's vegetables when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Brock riding toward the ranch, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. Without thinking, she set down her basket and walked to meet him, not caring who might see her eagerness. He dismounted when he reached her, dust from the trail coating his clothes but his eyes bright with what looked like anticipation. Flora, he greeted her, his voice carrying a warmth that made her name sound like poetry. Welcome home, she replied, suddenly shy despite all they'd shared. Everything went well? Better than expected. He glanced toward the house, where several hands were visible on the porch. Walk with me. I'd like to speak privately. They strolled toward the small creek that marked the eastern boundary of the ranch yard, neither speaking until they were well out of earshot of the house. Brock seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his usual confidence replaced by a tension Flora couldn't interpret. Finally, he stopped and turned to face her. I've been thinking a lot about the day you arrived here, he began. You were so determined to earn your keep, even when you could barely stand. Flora smiled at the memory. I was desperate. You were extraordinary, he corrected. And every day since then, you've proven it again and again. He took a deep breath. Flora, when I found you at my door offering to wash stables for food, I thought I was helping a woman in need. I never imagined you'd end up saving me. Saving you? She echoed, confused. This ranch was failing before you came, he admitted. I was working myself to death trying to keep it afloat, making mistakes because I was too proud to ask for help. You changed everything, the books, the operations, even the way I think about the future." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "In Cheyenne, I took care of the business I mentioned. But I also did this." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. It was my mother's. Flora's breath caught in her throat as Brock dropped to one knee before her, heedless of the dust. "Flora Kingsley, you came to my ranch offering to work for food, but what you gave was worth more than gold. I'm offering you my name in return if you'll have it. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Flora's vision as joy surged through her. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Brock Nightingale. I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to embrace her, Flora thought of the desperate woman who had collapsed at his door months ago. How impossible this moment would have seemed then, and how perfectly right it felt now. Their wedding took place on the first day of December, 1876, in the ranch house parlor decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries. The local preacher officiated, and every hand on the ranch attended, along with neighboring families who had come to respect the unusual couple. Lucas Harding stood as Brock's best man, his gruff exterior softened by genuine happiness for his boss. Mrs. Winters, tears streaming down her face, attended Flora, who wore a simple dress of deep blue wool that Brock had ordered from Cheyenne. "I, Brock, take thee, Flora, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Flora repeated the vows, her voice carried all the emotion of her journey from starvation and desperation to love and belonging. As Brock slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, she felt the last piece of her heart fall into place. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration lasted well into the night, with food, music, and dancing. As Brock led Flora in a waltz, he held her closer than propriety might dictate, but no one seemed to mind. "Mrs. Nightingale," he murmured, the name still new and wonderful to both their ears. "How does it feel?" "Like coming home," she answered truthfully. "Like I've found where I belong at last." Later, when they were finally alone in what was now their shared bedroom, Brock took her hands in his. "I want you to know something," he said earnestly. "This ranch is as much yours as mine now. The papers I signed in Cheyenne put half of everything in your name." Flora stared at him in astonishment. "Brock, that's not necessary. As your wife, as my wife, you're my partner in every sense." He interrupted gently. "You saved this place, Flora. I want to make sure that if anything happens to me, you'll never again be in the position you were when we met." Touched beyond words, Flora reached up to trace the strong line of his jaw. "Nothing is going to happen to you. We have too much life to live together." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "That we do, Mrs. Nightingale. That we do." Spring came to Wyoming Territory with renewed promise. The harsh winter gave way to green grass and wild flowers, and Nightingale Ranch flourished under its owner's joint stewardship. Flora's innovative management combined with Brock's ranching expertise had created one of the most prosperous operations in the county. On a warm May morning, Flora stood on the porch, watching as Brock worked with a young colt in the corral. His patience with the spirited animal reminded her of how he'd been with her, seeing potential where others might have seen only liability, nurturing strength instead of exploiting weakness. She placed a hand over her still flat stomach, a secret smile playing on her lips. She'd tell him tonight about the child they'd created, another new beginning in a life already transformed by love and second chances. As if sensing her thoughts, Brock looked up from his work and met her gaze across the yard. The connection between them was palpable, a bridge built of shared struggles and triumphs, of respect that had blossomed into passionate love. Flora remembered the desperate hunger that had driven her to this ranch, offering to wash stables just to fill her empty stomach. She could never have imagined that the tall, serious rancher would see beyond her ragged appearance to the woman beneath, or that in giving her his name, he would also give her a future brighter than any she had dared to dream. "Thank you," she whispered to the Wyoming wind, her gratitude encompassing everything: the man who had become her husband, the ranch that had become her home, and the life growing within her that represented all their hopes for tomorrow. Brock raised a hand in greeting, and Flora returned the gesture, her heart full. From starvation to abundance, from loneliness to love, her journey had been remarkable, but she knew the best chapters were yet to be written, in the story they would continue to create together.